Thanks and welcome back. This next presentation we call 3D redimensionalization. I'm working with the Autodesk Flame product, also with Maya. And you're going to see some really cool techniques here drilling into that mono to stereoscopic conversion process. Could be part of a bigger workflow with your complete grading and timeline tools, and perhaps with Flame Premium. But we're just drilling in here to the specifics of how we go from mono to stereo. So this is perhaps one part of your process, and really a really kind of interesting technical dive in, if you like, to the process of taking something and turning it into stereoscopic footage. There's a bunch of techniques that we're going to show you today, kind of a small, medium, and large example of 3 different shots using different technologies within the system. So, here I am working on the Autodesk Flame product. You could also do this within Flame Premium. But specifically, just wanted to give you a little idea as to how this could all work. If I open out into my procedural compositing environment, which by the way is where we do all our A over B procedural compositing, a special node called Action, which is like our camera scene or a 3D environment, you'll see that I can just put into my scene here a simple geometry. So this is a coliseum here, as you can see, and I have also a stereo camera rig in my scene. So hopefully you can imagine that if I look from like an overhead view here, you can see how this works. So essentially the camera is pointing at a real 3D object. So what you're seeing over on the right here is the output, and then this is the zero parallax plane. So I can then take my stereo camera here. This is the standard Maya FBX camera, or the Autodesk FBX camera here, available in your post tools. If I send my zero parallax back towards the end of there, hopefully you'll be able to see how that now looks like it's pushing forward of the plane. If I undo that, hopefully this just gives you an idea of the ability to take something that's mono, just an object in this case, and view it from a stereo camera. It's a real virtual camera rig which looks at things via 2 eyes, just like you and I do. It also has a center camera, as you can see. So that's just so you can understand that the tools are there for mono to stereo. But of course, when you work with live action material, you have flat plates, right? So mono flat plates. And I just wanted to show you with these 3 shots here how you might have various different levels of complexity to deal with. You might have inanimate objects which just need to kind of get the depth that they're naturally seeking for. You might have humans, right? They tend to appear in some shows as well, where you need to do rotoscoping and use a combination of techniques for cards and 3D displacement to actually get that really looking like it's stereoscopic. Or you might actually have something like this, where you actually have a complete scene with things moving around and a moving camera, and the need to really enlist your CG artist to build you a rig or a character that you could then project the image right back onto. If that doesn't all make sense for you, hopefully it will within the next 20 minutes, as I'm going to take you through these examples. And I'll just start by just grabbing my building. And you can imagine that the first thing you might do here is use a technique that we call displacement mapping. That's just to take the image itself and use it as its own displacement based on the luminance of its pixels. So let me just show you what I mean. So I have an image here. I'm going to go down here to my Maps tab in Action and add a displacement map. That's what I meant to say. And displacement, as the name suggests, allows you to pull pixels forward and backward in space based on their pixel value. So I'm going to send this back, as the light colors are obviously going to need to go in the background. But the problem is, of course, that I could smooth it, but this is distorting my image, right? So if you look in my perspective view, you can see what that's done. It sent it straight backwards in space, and I have a very clever mode here on my displacement map called camera displace. So hopefully you can imagine that that's really great as a way of keeping the image looking the same, but actually displacing its pixels. So then all I need to do in this situation is add a stereo camera into my scene. So I'm going to add my camera right here. tell it to be stereo, and then of course I need to use that as my viewing camera, and you can see I get an instant stereo result. So this is just using the image as displacement, and you can see that happily you can deal with shots like this in 2 minutes, have a stereo result. So this is just a simple using the image as displacement, and I can then take my camera, do that same zero parallax adjustment, decide where I want the plane to be so as to pull the buildings forward, or if I undo there, you can see pushing them back in space. And again, if I break the link here, no stereo, stereo. So hopefully that just gives you an idea of these sort of foundation tools. If I actually just pull out an example of this a little further along, I'll just show you some of the techniques that you could do to further refine this. So I'm actually going to use my histogram tool here to just define an area of the image that or an area of luminance that I want to concentrate on. I could then combine that with a gradient here. If I just show you, this is just a simple gradient that I've just animated over time a little bit. And if I look at the result here, you can see how this is a way of building density to generate depth. So then, if I then feed that into my building, you can see that this is a slightly, just a little refinement on that technique where I've got a special element here that can still be used and tweaked and displaced as it suits me. So again, the same stuff is working here, just a slightly smoother extraction there. I can even see how it's a proper 3D displacement. That is again a real quick and easy way of getting a great looking result on a piece of footage. But as we said, so lots of these things tend to get more complicated. If I just bring in my guy here, I've built a little displacement map for him. It's actually just a still. So we can use this, just a single still that we've built for a person's face, and wrap that in to our stereo story. So you could see how the steps here would be to take this guy, I'm going to put him in and mask him out. So rotoscoping might be another part of what you're thinking about, is going to be a big part of mono to stereo conversion. And indeed, we have some really great tools for that here. It's very much an artist's tool, hopefully you can see. As well as being able to build complex stuff, I can also work quickly, prove concepts right in the scene here. So I'm adding a G-mask right into my action environment. And I'm actually just going to go to the end of this sequence. You can see how the hand moves. And just to outline this hand, probably the hardest part of this shot to rotoscope, right? And go through here, just pick an outline that makes sense to me. And then what I'll do is I'll drive the movement not with a vertex-based tracker, but with what we call a shape tracker. So this is just a really cool technique to be able to then go through here and do an analysis of movement. And you'll start to see how this is actually grabbing points. Let me just reframe that so you can see exactly what's going on here. So as we track through here, you can see that what it's doing is not using the edges, it's using the data in the middle of the content, dynamically updating. It's a technology that's sometimes used for color grading. We have it in our Flame Premium real-time grading tool. But here we're using it for compositing. So even though it doesn't work completely accurately, it's a great foundation technology that gives us good data, if you like. So that movement, the nuances in movement of this scene can be captured, and then with a little bit of refinement, we can get some great looking roto going. So this is just a tool that's worth a try, especially for this kind of organic movement. And it allows us to then, you can see now what we've got so far. If I just temporarily turn off my background here, you'll be able to see that this is made a hole right in here. So I can just come in here and invert that, and you can get an idea what we've got. So with a little bit of refinement, like I said, you might take the edges of your tool here. So maybe you'll take your shape and then go in and do a little bit of adjustment. So we'll take our vertices and we'll scale them all around a centroid point. So these are the kind of tools that make rotoscoping a lot easier, to be able to move all your points there, dial in, let's just do another adjustment at the midpoint, and you can see how we've got an idea of how we could get this done, right? So you might just then go picking in specific parts, dial that in. We also can add some softness in here and really get a nice looking kind of edge effect going there. So what the next step to do here would be to then take my image. Let's just take this. It's sitting over its background. And as I move it in space, you're going to start to see things happening. So what I mean by that is I'm going to move it forward and backward. And let's just add a stereo camera into our scene here as well. That's going to be important. And I'll just tell my camera to be stereo. We'll use this as our viewing camera. And of course, you don't get to see anything by default, but by connecting in my background one last time, what I can do here is I can then move this one layer that we're working on in space. So I'm going to grab it here, and as I move it, you'll see how it gets a stereo effect. So that's cool and all, but I don't want to scale it. I want to use my auto scale function here to actually displace this move this in space without moving its position. So this is a technique that lets you go in here and you can see how this works, where what's actually happening here is it moves back and forth with just the right amount of inverse scale adjustment to give us a stereo effect. So again, another useful building block to get a stereo result if you need to. If we then bring in our layer here, what you could actually do would be to take this guy, put him into your scene, and then what we'll do is we'll actually track him into place as well. So I'll just take this layer here, and I'll just screen it in so you can see where it is. So if we just go to our view here, what we'll be able to do is see him in there, and then I'd like to just track him into place. So just these are the sort of the blocks, the building blocks that you can see going together. This is our traditional point tracker now available to us. So if we grab him, put him there, just place those one more time. Put that one there, and this one here. And if we do an analysis here, let me just activate that guy. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to analyze that movement to give us some, even though it's just a still, it can be used as a way of viewing displacement in here. So if I back out of there, you'll see that's given me the basic piece, the basic idea of movement here. I'll drag another one of these out and just offset that to put it in just the right spot so that you can see how this could then be used to put this into just the right sort of framing so that this then follows him as he moves along. We'll move it up just a little bit. Then I don't want to use that as an image, right? I want to use it as displacement. So I'm going to bring in my source one more time and then use that tracking data with a displacement source. So this is the displacement. And it's kind of just a process now of reusing the technique that we used on the building as a way of then dialing this in. So I'm just going to use this guy right here. And if I start pulling this forward in Z, you'll be able to see how I get this rather cool Pinocchio effect on my guy until I use my camera displacement. And then you can start to get an idea of how this could really work for you. So just with a little slightly gentler touch here, you can see how this goes together to produce a real kind of nice stereo result on my content here. So you can see hopefully the difference between the chin, the nose, the eyes when you're looking with your glasses on. So of course you would take that and do more and more of that to really get a result that looked by taking that combination of cards and displacement, you could get somewhere that looked a bit more like this, where you've done 4 or 5 of those, and you actually have something which is displaced like that and then gets stereoed like this. So it's just a good little combination of techniques there to get that one solved. So let's just dip into a third example here, where we actually have that we want to take our guy here, and we want to be able to do a rotoscope of him. So this is a way of being able to. I'm using those same masking tools to cut out my guy, and I want to do a track. So I'm just going to show you this this track that I built. That is a camera analysis track. So we have that tool here as well. The ability to come through here and then build points which really form the foundation of what would work with a CG application. And I can now take this and export this camera to be used on the CG side. We'll come back to look a little bit more at this right after that. So Daryl there has been working with my camera actually for a little while, and you're going to see how combining the camera with the animated geometry that he's going to build, we're actually able to bring it back in here and use it for that projection. So, there he is.
So as you can see, I've got that same camera track and background plate that Will had exported out of Flame for me. And what I want to do is I want to start to animate a character on top of this. And we're going to use some of the tools inside of Maya to do this. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and display a character that's already been set up. This is actually just a clip art piece of geometry and rig that comes in from our visor. And we want to make this character kind of puffy. We're not concerned about matching the movement perfectly because we're just trying to get a little bit of Z information to use inside of Flame. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just shift right mouse click on top of this guy. Actually, let's go and grab that and bring up our sculpt geometry tool. And we're just going to puff this out a couple times. So if I just hit the flood fill with the move normal tool a couple of times, we've now gone ahead and created a puffy character. So I can go and begin positioning the arms using forward rotation values. And that's kind of hard to animate a character that way. So what we want to do is add a very high level control rig on top of this character. And we're going to use a characterization tool to do that. What we're going to end up with is a rig that's got the human IK algorithm. So you'll notice that some of my bones have already been populated. We want to further continue this work by just double-clicking on the bone in the characterization tool and then matching it to the corresponding bone in the Maya viewport. Once all of these bones have been filled out, you can see I now have a green circle that says my character is valid. So we can lock this character off and go ahead and create the control rig. So this control rig is a very sophisticated rig, and it really is a single mouse click to go ahead and generate it. We bring up the character controls window. You can see that I can begin positioning this character very naturally. So I'll just be setting keyframes using these inverse kinematics human IK rig to basically make this character follow along and kind of hand animate or roto animate on top of that background plate. And we'll end up with something sort of like this. So again, it's not exactly perfect. The guy kind of does this Gumby move here, and we're really more worried about locking down this last shot here. But that is going to give the creative finishing tool enough Z information to project that original source footage back on top of it and really kind of make this shot work.
Cool. Thank you, Daryl. We're going to be looking at that in just a second. And what I want you to see over here was the way that what I'm working on is the if they can show me up there, thanks. Yeah. So what I'm working on is the buildings. So in other words, I'm just building out into my scene here a bunch of cubes which can then be scaled up. And if we just look around here, you'll be able to see that I just attached my big cube here to this tracker, which is my right wall tracker. And as I just go ahead and change him to be a much larger object here, this is one of the ways of dealing with the background. So Daryl's dealing with the foreground. I'm going to deal with the exact sort of lineup of these blocks. And if you just look around, you can see that, so we really are building like a street effect here, which if I then wrap my scene with, you can see that by default it's going to wrap my scene with the cubes, thinking I want to put the plate on the end of the cubes. That's not quite what I want. What I want is I want to use my projection-based wrapping, which is a bit like that camera displacement, where it does from the point of view of the camera. If I just turn off my shading now, hopefully you'll be able to see how this is the environment that we want. This is some buildings locked into place that can then do our stereo displacement for us. So that gives us a result that looks like this. So you can get the idea that if I actually pick one of these guys, that's our kind of background build. If I turn on and off the ground plane, you can see how our bird is being brought forward. If I turn on and off the side wall, you can see how that brings my building forward. So there's a combination of techniques here. We've got the buildings blocked out that are moving based on that camera. But we also have, we want to bring in our guys. So if we just look here, what you'll be able to see is that this is another camera scene, or another action if you like, where I can then import right in my content. So I'm just going to go get the FBX model that Daryl made. So this is actually what we're calling the Puffy Man, because he doesn't have to be too accurate. He can just, as long as he covers the geometry, that's the important thing. So if I just come in here and show you how, again, with my sort of, just for a second, with my shading here, he's placed into the scene, and he's naturally getting stereo, of course, because if you think about it, he's moving towards me. So if I just go to my my camera view here, you'll be able to see what I mean by that. So if I just run through the scene, there he is over there. So just looking from a camera perspective view, he comes closer. And then what we do, of course, is we then take that same layer here. This is the guy with the rotoscoping. And we use that as a diffuse wrap. So I'm going to just take that in and wrap him up. But this time we need, of course, to use our same projection wrapping. And you can kind of see him over here from the perspective view as he walks in. And because he's being wrapped on this, it might look a little rough from the side, but if I show you how, looking from the foreground with the rotoscoping, you can see how by having something to place your video onto, you actually can get a stereo effect from this guy being wrapped into the scene. So you can, of course, modify this and dial this in and get this exactly how you want, but specifically, I want to just show you how you could combine the two together here. If I just add my context view here, I can then sort of do a mix between them. So if I just look in here and work on my camera, you can see how I could change the settings of our guy here and dial him in as if I just go to my end here, you'll be able to see as he comes all the way close to the bird, I might want to change his zero parallax so that he actually is looking in just the right spot here. So I don't want to go too far, of course, but if it's not enough stereo, it's not going to work. So I'm lining up his divergence to match just about right with the bird so that you really get a good stereo result. So I think that's all we have time for in this right now, but thank you so much for listening. This has been Flare 2012, reconstructing our 3D scene from mono to stereo. And the thing I'd like you to take away from this is that we at Autodesk approach stereo from a 3D perspective. Thanks.